We are live.
Executive Director of the Public Design Commission, and welcome. If you're joining us via Zoom and would like to testify, please sign up through the Google form link shown here and also linked on the meeting agenda. Handing it over to Deborah.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Martin. I'm PDC Chair. Welcome to the Public Design Commission meeting. Today's meeting is being held in person at City Hall. Members of the public can attend and give testimony either in person or remotely. The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda and items number 28559 to 28573. Please note that item number 28564, reconstruction of stairs, Riverside Park, West 105th Street, and Riverside Drive, Manhattan, has been withdrawn. Are there any recusals to note? Okay. Let the record show that.
Just for the consent
The
agenda.
consent agenda. Right. So let the record show there are no recusals for the consent agenda. Okay, I'll now call for a vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda and put your mic on. Isabel Castilla? Approved. Lori Hawkinson? Approved. Bill Heinzen?
Approved.
Manuel Miranda?
Approval.
Susan Morgenthau? Approved. Meryl Tisch, who is voting remotely?
Approval.
And is Mary with us or no? Okay, Jimmy Van Bramer?
Approved.
And I also approve all, so let the record show that all are in favor of approving the consent agenda, and it is so approved. Okay. We'll now continue with the public hearing portion of the meeting. The first item is item number 28574, the conceptual review of the installation of Growing into the Future by Natalia Nakazawa at Jackson Heights Community Library in Jackson Heights, Queens. Commissioner Van Bramer is recused and he has left the meeting for the duration of this item only. Per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. We can now proceed with the presentation. Shoshi, has anyone signed up to testify?
After the presentation, we will make that ask again.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead, team.
Okay. Hi.
Hello, good morning. I'm Sergio Pardo, the director of the Present for Our program. I would like to introduce Natalia Nakazawa, the artist selected for the Jackson Heights Library Present for Our Commission. We're also joined here today by Daniel Hemmindinger from Allied Works, part of the design team of this project. The budget for this project was $204,000 and some cash, which was used wisely to activate as much spaces as possible within the facility. The art locations were selected in agreement by all parties and with the guidance of QPL. And we'd like to briefly mention the community engagement done for this project. Early in 2022, we presented the project at Community Board 2 in Queens, followed by 2 selection panels during the year. In the first artist selection panel, we showed 27 artists. And in that panel, 4 artists were selected as finalists, being Natalia, one of the finalists, which then in the second panel, she was selected by consensus as the artist receiving this commission. In June of this year, the 15th of June, we went back to the community board where Natalia presented the conceptual design for this project and received approval from the board.
Thank you, Sergio. Oh, okay. Okay, I got it. Thank you for the explanation. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your time and attention. My name is Natalia Nakazawa. I'm an artist. I'm based in Queens, and I live in Jackson Heights, which is the neighborhood that we're going to be talking about today. I am an artist that works across painting, textiles, and social practice. I oftentimes use a lot of engagement in my practice in order to work with the public, work with all ages. My own work really focuses on ideas of transnationality, of cultural identity, of storytelling, and I use a lot of techniques from education, from activism. And again, I'm an artist parent living in Jackson Heights, so I very much care about this community. So I'm just going to start with a little bit briefly about my past work, and then we'll dive into the project. Here is a large scale work that's actually a permanent installation called Our Stories of Migration that again explores the idea of the unitedness of all of these different continents and some of our histories. Here's an image of the textiles up close. Here is an example of some mixed media work that I've produced. This one is called History Has Failed Us, But No Matter, based on the Min Jin Lee novel called Pachinko, which is an intergenerational novel. Here is, and I'm showing this work primarily because it relates to the materials of this project. This is a permanent installation in the South Bronx that was commissioned by the Percent for Art program. And it is a combination of ceramic, tile, and mosaic. Here's one more of mixed media. This is also a couple of pieces from a series of vessels that I made with inherited linens from my family and dealing with these sort of memories from the past. Here are some examples of the ways that I work with the public. I'm here working with youth from at the Brooklyn Children's Museum and also at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I'm just going to dive right into the project site. This is an aerial view and just a context for the borough. Here you can see that we are part of Community Board 3, and also this is part of the Jackson Heights Historic District map right here. So you can see where we are. That's the location of the Jackson Heights Branch Library from an aerial view. And again, the northeast and southwest facing views of the building. And this is the west side of the library. These are some more context images of the block. And we are lucky to have one of the members of Allied Works here, but we are working with two different architecture consultants, one being Allied Works Architecture and the other historic preservation subconsultant, BCA. This project is going across 3 different floors. So you can see the cellar floor, which is the bottom floor. The ground floor is the adult reading room. And then the second floor is the children's reading room. All of the artwork sites will be on the north facing walls. So you can see that consistently across all 3 plans. This is the original sort of panel proposal that was pitched. And after sort of discussing the ideas of this concept, I decided to focus a majority of the artwork on the 3 north-facing walls and put the majority of effort on those walls. We are no longer using these other transitory spaces in the hallways or in the garden space. So my title is Jackson Heights Growing into the Future. It's a multi-site immersive experience. And it is really exemplifying the idea of place consciousness and the building as a living ecosystem. So I wanted people to be able to move through the building and get an idea of where they are. So I really thought about cultural and community awareness, and I thought about place consciousness as the main principles. I also asked my friends to give me some ideas about what they loved about the library and what was meaningful to them about the library. So these are community responses. Oh. I was like, what's happening? Okay, so this is, again, I hope I'm doing okay with time, but this is the basic concept, which is looking at a healthy ecosystem or thinking about like a community as a well-connected ecosystem. So what does an ecosystem need? And in this case, I use the buttercup, which can be found throughout, parks and in between concrete blocks, and it's something that can be found anywhere in most healthy communities, in most communities. So it's just the idea that we have, root system, a connected root system. We have leaves and shoots, and then we have buds and flowers. So that's how I'm conceiving the whole building. So here are some images of the top floor, which is the children's room. And it's really amazing because there's a connected place where the second floor and the ground floor connect. So this is looking into that connection piece. And here again, you can see that connection between this is the ground floor going up to the second floor. So anytime you see a butterfly, these will be mosaics. And so just to give you an idea that there will be two different types of materials used or in the proposal. And then here is the teen room. Again, going down, there are some root systems. There's some of the, inhabitants of the healthy soil there. There's some earthworms and snails. And then again, this is just an overview so you can see where there will be installed bookshelves, and these are recessed into the wall. So I just want to mention that the artwork will not continue behind those spaces. Here's another example. This is the ground floor. And again, a close-up of the teen reading room. This is one of my favorite slides because you can really see the process here. This is a small tea glass mosaic. And this is from Italy. It's sourced from Italy. They are really wonderful because they're all different types of like matte and shiny materials. And you can kind of see what the process of taking a monarch butterfly and turning it into a mosaic looks like. And here's an example from my project in the South Bronx. And just to give you an idea of how much, texture and just like how much information can be included on even one tile. So it's very exciting. The maintenance is really simple and straightforward. These are the same materials that are used in many subway projects. So it's very easy to maintain. Simple, just dusting, regular maintenance. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any public testimony?
I don't see anybody in person. Rebecca, do we have anyone remotely signed up for remote testimony?
There is no one currently signed up. I do see some folks in the waiting room. If anyone, in the Zoom room, if anyone in the Zoom room would like to testify on this project, please either turn your video on and physically wave or raise your hand in the raise your hand feature. I think we're all set. I don't think we have anyone signed up for this project.
Okay, commissioners, do we have any comments, questions?
I'll just say, I think it's incredibly beautiful and exciting and just content wise, really engaging with the scale and the way you're thinking of the section of the building. So I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I really think, Ms. Laya, that you've created something that like generations of children growing up in Queens will remember, and they'll take it into their adulthood and associate reading and learning with that kind of beautiful image that you created. So thank you for that beautiful work. Okay, so I'll now take a roll call vote on item 28574. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your
Sorry,
vote.
Bill, did you have a comment?
No.
Oh, I just noticed.
ready to vote.
Oh, okay.
That's okay, no worries. Isabel Casilla? Approved. Lori Hawkinson?
Approved.
Bill Heinzen?
Approve.
Manuel Miranda?
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau?
Gladly approved.
Meryl Tisch? Approve. And I also approve, so the approval, let the record show the approval is unanimous. And we look forward to seeing it. Thank you. Okay, maybe we can have Commissioner Van Bramer.
Yes. If somebody could alert him, and then the next presenters can also be brought in.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait for Jimmy to come back. Okay, you're back.
Yes.
Great. Okay, moving on to the next item. It is item number 28575. Conceptual review of the installation of Al Kalam Poets in the Park by Sarah Uhadu at the Elizabeth H. Berger Plaza at the intersection of Greenwich Street, Edgar Street, Trinity Place, and Morris Street, Manhattan. Per standard procedure, applicants will give their presentation, public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We'll hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. We can now proceed with the presentation.
Let me know if the technology is picking up my voice. Hello, I'm Jennifer Lancis. I'm from the Parks Department's Art and Antiquities Office. And today we are here to present Al Kalam, Poets in the Park, which is a permanent artwork proposal by Sarah Uhadu for Elizabeth Berger Plaza, also here with the Washington Street Historical Society, which is the organizer. For a little background, the project actually started several years ago. Parks, the Washington Street Historical Society, as well as Department of Cultural Affairs Percent for Art program, and the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs, along with local electeds and organizations, came together to select an artist who would create a permanent artwork for this site, which did not yet exist. Sarah, I think you have control. If you want to
Hi, everyone.
slide, I'll introduce Sarah momentarily.
I can't slide. I don't have control.
Oh, not yet. Okay, sorry. She'll get control in a moment. So Sarah's work, actually, we will wait for the next slide. She was selected through a competitive process. And in a moment, you will see images of her prior work, which was included in that proposal, which led to her selection as the artist to create a work for this park. So here are images of her past work that were in that proposal. And if you go to the next slide, thank you, Sarah. These are some inspirational images that Sarah used to create a proposal for the artwork in the park. It is an honor to the neighborhood, the historic neighborhood of Little Syria. And before I hand it over to Linda Jacobs from the Washington Street Historical Society to talk a little bit more about the genesis of the project, I just wanted to note that this project is part of an ongoing effort by the Parks Department to better diversify our permanent art collection and better represent the many histories of New York City and its residents. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda Jacobs, who is our partner at the Washington Street Historical Society.
Thank you.
I'm Linda Jacobs. I'm a historian and scholar of the Syrian colony of Washington Street and also a descendant. All four of my grandparents lived on Washington Street in the 19th century. I wanted to just set the stage for Sarah's presentation by saying that the colony on Washington Street was a vibrant colony beginning in 1880, stretching from the Battery up to Albany Street and some of the cross streets over to Trinity Place as well, and even over to Pearl Street in some cases, but mostly centered on Washington Street. There were about 1,500 Syrian Lebanese living on Washington Street in the 1900 census. It was a site for a flourishing literary flowering, that was a redundant, literary flowering in the 19th century and early 20th century, culminating in the founding in 1916 and then once again in 1920 of Rabita al-Kalamia, which means the pen bond in Arabic. Khalil Gibran, Ilya Abu Madi, Amin Rihani, all of these very famous poets and writers who wrote both in English and in Arabic were part of the Syrian colony. And we began in 2017 to think about a memorial to those writers and poets of the Syrian colony, culminating in what you're seeing today. And Sarah will talk about her conception of the artwork and how it came to be.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I will go back to my type of artwork. So my name is Sarah Wadou. I'm a French Moroccan artist. My practice is all about craft, mostly in Morocco, and how craft can still be a basis for innovation nowadays, and how all those craft community can evolve. I also work a lot. I have in my topic identity and language. My family were immigrants coming from Morocco to France. They speak many different languages, dialects, but they are illiterate. They don't know how to read and write. I myself speak many different languages. I know how to read and write, but as everybody expects from me, I don't know how to read or write classic Arabic. This is why language and identities are a big part of my work. And I do a lot of sculpture that deal with those topics. That's why when it happened that I had to do an art piece in commemoration of the community of Little Syria and those poets, I felt part of that artistic family right away. And I wanted to do a concept, an art piece that will be a legacy of that philosophy of translation, sharing I'm going to show you here, sharing an identity and a language into a foreign country. So for those poets that we would call the Arab Enlightenment in the Arab world, it was about English and Arabic. But here we are in a park in New York City, Elizabeth Berger Plaza Park, and a lot of people from everywhere will cross the park. So I wanted to invent a new alphabet that will be an abstract one at the crossroad of, as you can see here, an architectural element, which is Islamic geometry, and Arabic letters. And I would translate the poems from the famous poet of the Little Syrian community into my alphabet or into my language. So it works like a code. You can't really properly read it, you have to decipher it. The poets from the park were into sharing. They wanted to share their culture and to embrace the new culture. They even invented the very first Arabic typewriting. And here I want the people who would cross the park to enter by the culture and embrace and understand who were those people living in that specific area of Little Syria. And at the same time, I also want all those people coming from everywhere, as New York is a cosmopolitan city, understand how it feels like to be an immigrant in a foreign country, where you have to decipher, feel the culture, and dig deep and dive in to be part of it. So here you have the whole concept. This is the park, downtown Manhattan, Elizabeth Berger Plaza Park, and I will let Jennifer to.
Yeah, before we get into the details of the exact elements proposed by Sarah, I wanted to give you a little context. This is Elizabeth Berger Plaza. It opened in 2021. Prior to that, it was actually just a series of disparate traffic triangles and really treacherous intersections. So Sarah, you can go to the next page. The park has created a unified green pedestrian corridor. There are a lot of kind of curving pathways, stone seat walls, and a central lawn space. The park was designed by George Vilanicus, and at the time, it was an opportunity for the Washington Street Historical Society to give input onto that design. Because we did know at the time that it was designed that a permanent artwork, Sarah's permanent artwork, would be incorporated into this space. So this gives you a general sense of the park. It's a very complex space. It's a little hard to tell from the schematic, but there are several entrances to the Rector Street subway station within this space, lots of subway vents, and a significant number of complicated utilities just below ground, which is something to note. Sarah's work is going to be composed of 3 sculptural elements, as well as an interpretive and historical signage, which you can see here. The existing stone seat walls will each receive a mosaic backrest, and a sculpture will be placed on the center lawn. The sculpture is going to be placed within the eastern planting bed. The artwork was specifically placed there because the community was very vocal about retaining the lawn space there for passive use. We've also found traditionally that artworks placed within a planting bed does wonders for deterring climbing and vandalism. We've also found that since the park has opened, pedestrians tend to use this eastern corridor predominantly, that the sculpture is closest to. However, the mound is not so high of the lawn that it would interrupt the viewing of the sculpture. It's visible from all areas of the park and all sides of the sculpture. So we feel that it's an appropriate location where it is centrally located, but it retains some of the things that the community has asked for. And one final note is that the sculpture actually, you can't tell from the schematic, but it's actually slightly arched, and that's mimicking a stone curb that delineates the planting bed from the lawn proper. So it does kind of work within the larger park design. So I'll turn it over to Sarah to talk about the different concepts.
So I will begin the body of work. I will begin by those 2 what we call seating walls. Those are the main artwork where I will display the curated poems from the poets. It's about 9 poems that I have translated. And it's all made by glass mosaic, gold background and colorful glass mosaic. I have chosen those materials and techniques to also echo the holistic belief of the poets from the park who were about universality, even belonging to many different religions. And so this architectural element as mosaics and also the gold, the color, it echoes the icons, stained glass from the churches, synagogue, and mosques. And here you will see I have chosen a black background, in a metallic black background, so it can disappear into the planting bed, and we don't focus on the structure, but we focus on the art piece. And so there is 2 of them to display as many poems as we can. And finally, I want to show you some technical drawings. So as you can see here, we have an open angle, so it helps shed the water, but it also help the art piece to be visible for people standing and sitting. This is not the side I wanted to show you. Here you can see, so that's why we have worked together to calculate how to display the specific art piece. And finally, the second art piece from the body of work is this sculpture. So the sculpture is powder coated gold that matches the mosaic, as you have seen before. It's not a super shiny gold. It's the gold, like an ancient gold, to really recall the holistic places. And here, some of the faces, like here and here, are mosaic faces inside the stainless steel sculpture. The word displayed here into the abstract alphabet is al-kalam. Al-kalam means the word, or even it could even mean the verb. And it was one of the words that the poets would use to define themselves. A word is an entire universe in itself. And I think nowadays it has a lot of meaning to put that specific word in that park, as we are in a visual era. And I want to show you that inside, so you can see how it's displayed and it's posed the curve of the plant of the mound, but also, as you can see, inside Al Kalam sculpture, you would have all the name of the poets. So the sculpture embodied all those poets who were there. The names are in the abstract alphabet, of course, but also in Arabic and in English, so everybody could see who was there. That's some details. And finally, we will have, of course, so those are some samples. And as you can see, you can better see the materiality of it. The choice of the glass mosaic that belongs from different type of spiritual architecture, shiny architectures, and only the letters comes from Islamic geometry. Signage, we will have signage, of course, to give some historical, of course, the background, but also that's where you can find the alphabet and try to play and decipher what's written in the park. We will, of course, also display the translations in Arabic and in English. And finally, I would like to open this project to the fact that it's a body of work in the park, but it intends to be much more and invite people interact with it, learn from it, invite the local community to develop projects around it, to discuss who was living in Little Syria neighborhood. And one of the first projects that have been developed by Washington Historical Society is this application where you can see live the art piece and have some translations and background. And that's it for me. Thank you. I will let Jennifer continue. Thank you.
So I just want to reference the maintenance of the work once it has been installed in the park. You should be aware that any privately funded permanent artwork on parkland, there's a requirement that the organizer raise an endowment to ensure its maintenance in perpetuity. The endowments are typically between $150,000 to $200,000, and that's placed in an interest-bearing account with our fiscal sponsors at the City Parks Foundation. And that ensures that we are always have resources to care for the piece. We require that all organizers provide us with that endowment in full prior to the piece actually being installed within the park. So we are prepared and ready no matter what happens to the work. In terms of annual cleaning, it would be regular kind of wash and detergent. The more typical types of vandalism, which is graffiti. The mosaics just need an acetone to remove the graffiti. The steel components would need a graffiti remover, but there will be a clear preservative coat over the steel pieces to add additional protection for those pieces. And then we've also worked with Linda as well as UAP, who we're working with on the fabrication of the pieces, to identify kind of specialized treatments that mosaics may need and what those costs are to ensure that the final endowment raised by Washington Street is appropriate for its care. Washington Street Historical Society, throughout the design of this artwork and currently, before it's even in the park, have been working with local arts and Arabic American organizations. They are providing current programming in the park and will continue to do so after the work is installed. And that is in addition to working with, there's a neighboring elementary school that we've been speaking with, and there's a lot of opportunity there for collaboration. And then the next slide, the project cost is $900,000, which has been raised and is in hand. And I think that's primarily it. I think we'll bring it to the last slide, and thank you very much for listening to the presentation. And I welcome questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Shoshi, do we have any public testimony?
Thank you. Seeing no hands in this room, I will move on to the remote testimony if we have. Rebecca, do we have any remote testimony?
We do not have anyone signed up on the Google form, but again, we have folks in the Zoom meeting. If there's anyone in attendance who'd like to testify, please use the raise your hand feature or turn on your video and physically raise your hand. Okay, I think we are all set and no one is signed up to testify.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Lori.
Very beautiful and content wise, super interesting. I just had a more of a technical question since I'm the architect sitting here, so I asked those kind of things. I was interested in a section through the stone bench
Mhm.
and the back with the mosaic. I didn't see that. I was just trying, because I was curious about, I'm looking
The
now, at
connection point?
Isabel. Yeah, is there a space there?
So
And the
Sarah,
height of the planting
Mhm.
on the inside relative to this back and the bench,
Mhm.
right? Those three pieces I was interested in.
so
Yeah. I was
Oh.
looking in here, but I didn't see it.
if you
So-
can move
go.
it forward, Sarah, to some of the drawings, next slide. Next slide. Are you able to get it to one of the drawings that UAP provided? With the canted, okay. So what our plan is this will run directly up against the existing seat wall, but they're going to be independent of the seat wall. It won't necessarily, it won't be engineered so that all of the weight of this, as well as the weight of people resting against it, is going to be on that seat wall. Instead, there will be a series of piers that are all interconnected. This will abut the wall, and there will be several connection points to keep it secure. Of course, this is still early assessment, and engineering by UAP is, if we get conceptual approval, we will dive into those details.
So it's really that drawing on the right that
Yes,
I'm interested in,
Mhm.
and where it sits relative to the stone down below, no, on the way over to the right there. And
this,
then if you move your finger to the right, that's where the stone is, right?
so this is below grade,
Right.
and then the stone wall
is
comes to right about here.
there.
And it will sit up against the stone wall,
Right.
kind of parallel to it,
So
and then
there's
this
a-
is the seat back
So
that
I'm
raises
interested
above
in the
it.
Gap,
Mhm,
because there should be a gap.
mhm.
And then, I mean, I'm looking over here. So, and then to the left,
Uh-huh.
where the top of the earth and the plant. So if you had one drawing that put all those things
Yeah.
together, I think that's gonna be really helpful. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
troubleshooting, that's all.
We'll
Yeah.
provide that information to UAP, and they'll be able
And
to
then you
generate
said
that.
there's a vertical member that's not shown here. That
Um,
holds up, that is the vertical, you said they're vertical.
oh, this is just the wall essentially is the vertical element.
So
The,
that's whole thing is a piece of, it's steel frame.
yes, this will kind of be its own independent element that will have several connections. This is, again, we haven't gotten really deep into
And
the
then
engineering
it's
elements.
Attached.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll kind of like be up against
Great.
the wall.
Great.
Yeah, I think I have similar questions to Laurie, and
Mhm.
glad to hear this is still conceptual, right?
Yes.
It would be good to see the whole section, because whether there is a gap between the piece of artwork and the wall
Mhm.
that's open and acts more like a rain screen, or a gap that's sealed, that may affect the aesthetics and the cleanliness of this.
Mhm.
Obviously, a rain screen is better from aesthetics, but
Uh-huh.
I've also seen a lot of people like, sticking trash in there. So it's something that you need to consider. How big is the gap?
Mhm.
How does it, react to a public space where not everybody's, as respectful as they should be with the artwork.
Mm.
My other comment also has to do with the section, and it's to understand its relationship with the seat wall.
Okay.
It was great to hear directly from Sarah the intent of why it's angled, so that it can be read as someone is standing, whereas also be read as when someone is sitting, which is really good to understand.
Mhm.
But I would also like to understand the exact angle in relationship to the depth of the seat,
Yep.
to ensure that if someone does want to sit there with their back against the artwork, because you're not currently prohibiting that from happening, that is still a comfortable proportion.
Agreed. Yeah. And we'll be looking into all of those. And when we come back, should we get conceptual approval, we'll come back with preliminary, and having looked into all of those concerns.
One more question, just maybe for Sarah too, is the artist is the back. Because what we're showing here and what you're showing in green is actually black, metallic black. So you'll be seeing the metallic black. I mean, that's why I'm wondering how high are the plants and.
Yeah.
Perspective looking across of the back.
Yeah, we can
What does that
provide
look
better angles and like what that experience is for those on this side of the pathway.
Yeah, like that looks like.
Yeah, and we can give general ideas of what the planting that exists here is in terms of its existing heights, as well as over time, the kind of mature height that these would reach. So that we have an idea over time how this will be impacted.
Thank you.
Anything else?
On the sculpture itself, it's not clear to me from the drawings how how tall is that?
So the total height of these highest points of the sculpture are about 7 feet, and the length of the sculpture is approximately 15 feet.
Uh-huh.
I have plans. Wait, here we go. So it's a 220. It was the same, like we tried to have, we studied many different proportions, and I tried to have a proportion that's not too big because the mound is not so big, so we can't be too big, and at the same time something that would be visible enough. So we decided of I speak in meters, I'm sorry, in 220 meters and 5 meter long.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question about the funding. You mentioned the 900,000 is in hand. And then the maintenance usually is around 150 to 200. Does that include the maintenance or in the
So-
900, or they've also?
So the 900 is strictly the fabrication and associated costs, artist fee. The 150 to 200,000 maintenance is separate from that.
And that's in hand as well?
That's currently being raised.
Okay,
So it won't need to be in hand probably, for like another year or so.
Right.
So fundraising is active.
sounds like with the 900 in hand, you probably feel fairly confident
Yeah.
that you'll get to the 150 to 200.
Yeah, it's a reasonable amount to raise over the course of the next year.
Okay.
We're gonna call it a conservation. not a project maintenance fund. That's more exciting.
Yes.
Just, sorry, we're just wondering back to the sculpture, and I was asking Manuel.
Mhm.
So we go to that, and then there's text in there, right? When we see the sculpture in the mound. There, when you go, and then your mock-up of it there.
Mhm.
So it's 7 feet high, and then how far back am I? And am I meant to read? What am I meant to read, and can I see it from the distance, I guess? And maybe I'm misunderstanding. Yes.
Sarah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good question. No, actually, it's a really good question. And the minimum letters that I have tried so far, we did some mock-ups, and those which you have seen are the smallest letter we can do. And I think that's what will be in there. It's 7 centimeters here, like for the highest. And that's the smallest we can go. And it's still visible from as far as the pathway is far from the sculpture, so you could see it. And as for the English and the Arabic, I would go for the same, even if here my drawings are not a good scale. Like honestly, this is not good. I will be bigger for sure.
So we should read that. English. Sorry. So we should be able to read the English.
Yeah, yes, that's the intention. Is
Okay.
that people read the English, read the Arabic.
Like to read it. Okay.
Anything else, Bill? Okay. Okay, Manuel? No. Yeah,
A kind of standard guideline is 1 inch for every 10 feet. But I think it's an artwork, so I'm not sure, obviously it's up to you, but I think determining, legibility versus just perception, I think it's an artwork. So it's different from like the interpretive signage, which the Parks Department is doing. That has to be legible. But I think the art itself, it's a artwork. So I think it has a little bit of a different kind of requirement for legibility.
And I think, over the course of the actual fabrication plans, we'll be able to do mock-ups on site, bring them so that we'll know in real space what
great.
works.
That's great.
okay. So this is a very elegant work, Sarah. Thank you for adding
you.
this to the landscape of our city, and also for making sure that we have a marker that tells about that community and that time and that part of our city. When we see it again, we would love to have some clarification on the seat section, which I know Parks will do, specifically the relationship between the seat and the space, the opening between the work and the seat, as well as the angle, the view from the back, the plants, the plant height, and then also just having a look at the legibility of both the English and the Arabic lettering.
Okay.
So, but again, very elegant, lovely work that we are excited to see in public space. When is this meant to be constructed, do you know?
Linda, I think the hope is for construction in like a year or so. Is that accurate? You're the Fox Hall.
So I need to have the question repeated. I'm sorry. 'cause I
Oh,
didn't hear.
I was just curious when we might be able to go and see the work, when you have it planned to be constructed.
When it might be constructed.
Yeah,
Oh, well, we're hoping for 2024.
excellent.
And that's as close as I can come right now.
That's
So,
very close.
yeah, and we have.
Last time I checked, it was next year.
Yeah, we're having programming that we want to put together and we want to work with the new school that's down there and all of that stuff, but we have to wait until we really know we're in fabrication.
I see. Well, that's exciting. Thank you.
But they are holding regular programming. So I encourage everyone to go down there and listen to Arabic poetry with the New York Arabic Orchestra,
Yeah,
etc.
we were with the River Festival this summer.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
I gave 4 tours of Washington Street.
Lovely.
Which is really fun.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That's great. Okay, so we'll now take a roll call vote on item 28575. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote. Isabel Casilla. Approved. Lori Hawkinson. Approved. Bill Heinzen.
Approved.
Manuel Miranda.
Approved.
Susan Margenthal. Approved. Merrill Tisch. We'll come back to Merrill. Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approved.
Merrill, are you there? Okay, well, I also approve, so let the record show that all present are in favor, and that's unanimous, and the project is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we will now. You're done. Thank you. Thank you. Well, little. I know, right? I know. Oh, wow. and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. We can now proceed with the presentation. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alicia West, and I'm DEP's Director of Public Design Outreach. It's a pleasure to be back here to be presenting this exciting project. So we were last here about a year ago to present the conceptual plans. The commission was very encouraging and had some great feedback that we've been working to incorporate since then. So since last summer, we have been busy. We brought Star White House on board to work with Hazen. And we've also been continuing our community engagement process. So let's see, with me today, I've got Gail Whitward-Laird and Ankita Gupta from Star White House who will be giving the presentation today. We also have Dahlia Thompson from Hazen, who is on Zoom or should be. And we've also got our partners from the Parks Department here as well. Mitchell Loring will be here to answer any questions you may have. So I know some of you are new to this project, so just a really quick recap. So our project site is located in the Bronx. And it begins in the southwest corner of Van Cortlandt Park, just south of the pond. And it runs down the decommissioned rail line that runs parallel to the Major Deegan Expressway and out to the Harlem River. And the project that we'll be presenting today goes about to 230th Street. This portion that is in the dotted line is actually a below ground conduit through an MTA easement. More on that later. Right. So Tibbetts Brook is a freshwater brook that historically ran from Westchester all the way down to the Harlem River. And you can see its historic course on this map here. Around about 100 years ago, it was routed into the combined sewer system on Broadway. And today, what that means is it's contributing to combined sewer overflows into the Harlem River, which is a problem. So this project is going to reroute the stream into what we call a daylighted stream channel that will run down our project site, and you'll see more on that later. And in doing that, we're going to be mitigating over 220 million gallons of combined sewage into the Harlem River every year. So that's very exciting for us. This is DEP's biggest green infrastructure project to date. And it's also a critical piece of what's called our long-term control plan, which is a state-approved plan to mitigate combined sewer overflow. All of that is wonderful, but even more wonderful is that we'll also be extending the public greenway for over a mile, creating really valuable green space in this community and providing a critical link in the regional bike network. So I'm going to hand it over to Gail now, and she's going to walk you through sort of the big picture planning and some of the context, and then Ankita will take it over from her. All right, Gail.
Thank you, Alicia, and good. Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, good morning, or which one it is. So as Alicia mentioned, when we got on board, we zoomed out for a minute. There had already been some conceptual design done. We zoomed out. We wanted to look at the broader greenway network, transportation, open space, and see how this project nestled in those other projects. One of the things that is particularly important to note that this isn't just the piece of a citywide greenway, it's part of the now Empire State Trail, which you get on this, you'll end up in Canada. And also, interestingly enough, the East Coast Greenway. So you can hear kind of the triple brand, which tells you how important this link is. So now you'll have a continuous off-road link from in the city from Westchester to 230th. This is the extents that we'll be looking at today from the area within Van Cortlandt Park, which is much wider, and then into the former rail corridor from Van Cortlandt Park South to West 230th. As I said, we looked at the broader context when we first started the project, joining Hazen and their team. Two key things changed since conceptual. We've extended the Greenway south an additional block from Bergville to 230th. This gives better connectivity to the existing Greenway network. And we also adjusted and minimized the number of access points in Van Cortlandt Park. And the key thing being, looking at the more direct connection, the way that people naturally want to go anyway, from West 242nd into the park. A lot of east-west traffic in the park. So the access points better correspond to that east-west traffic. We also looked when doing the trail design and access points at maintenance needs for DEP and parks. Since this will be jointly maintained by both agencies and it's a critical piece to this. We also met with FDNY and NYPD to make sure that they were comfortable with emergency access to the corridor. The access points are every single one, universally accessible and at gradual grades of less than 5%. Just to give you an overview of the character of the two different zones of the project within Van Cortlandt Park. It's a historic park from the late 1800s, open fields, forested areas, wetlands, kind of your classic park language adjacent to the project. So this is a view looking actually in a park path very close to where the daylit will be. And here's a view of the CSX corridor, very narrow in some places. In many areas, it's below the grade of the highway or at the grade of the highway. On the east and on the west, there are lots of big box stores. You really feel like you're in a channel or tunnel when you're in the CSX corridor. So here's where the project begins, where the former stream used to go into the Broadway sewer here, and now will be rerouted and exit into the park here into the daylit stream corridor, and then the adjacent greenway. The greenway currently ends exactly at this pond, so the greenway and daylit stream begin in tandem here. This fairly large parking lot's really critical for the project and the park. Right now, many people are using the golf course park here. And in the project, you'll see how we designed it also as a trailhead. A lot of people are coming from all over to get on this trail. So the access points are, it's important that all forms of transport can get to them. So this is in essence, a trailhead. So I'm going to turn over the project to Ankita Gupta in Star White House, and she'll take you through the details. So here's to the right, this advance.
All right, thanks, Gail. Hi, everyone. All right, so I'm going to walk you through the design of the project. Okay, so to the right-hand side is the mill pond, and this is where the project starts. The daylighting of the stream, as well as the Putnam Greenway begins. The Greenway itself knits with the existing circulation of the park, and it runs east to the proposed stream. We are using porous asphalt as well as full depth asphalt for at-grade paths. And then you see a sliver of the parking at number 4. We are reimagining the parking lot itself to become a trailhead and connection to the Greenway, provide ADA spots here. And so here we are looking at an existing path. This is above the historic pond dam. To the right-hand side is the mill pond, and to the left is where the future stream will be daylit. Here's a view looking south to where the daylit stream will be built. And then here's a rendering looking south over the daylit stream. It has wetlands at the lower levels. We are using a black painted steel railing over here. This is the same style as the one that's on the bridge that's over the dam, the existing bridge. And then in terms of the bench, we're using the 1939 World's Fair bench, again, keeping in line with the historic aesthetic of the park. So just talking a little bit about the open stream channel design here. It's a shallow stream with a constant water flow. During dry weather, the stream depth will be 1 to 2 feet with a constant flow of 7 cubic feet per second. And it is stone lined to create pools and riffles. Moving south, this is where the Putnam Greenway will be extended. Going south to the left, you see a former steel railway structure. This is going to be retained in place and stabilized. And then further south in the parking lot, we are going to have a trailhead over here. So just looking everything in plan now, the parking lot will have 2 access points that you can see in yellow. Each access point, as Gail mentioned earlier, is ADA accessible, as well as it's going to allow for maintenance as well as emergency vehicles. The other thing to note about these are all access points in the project will have a common kit of parts. So they have seating, trash receptacles, bike racks, as well as signage. And then we have 2 pedestrian bridges marked as number 2, and those allow to cross from the Putnam Trail to basically connect to bolster the east-west connection in the park. These are painted steel flat truss bridges, and they also allow the user to cross the water and experience that daylit stream. So here's a view looking north. So to the left, you see the painted steel flat truss bridge crossing over the daylit stream. The lower levels at the stream are native wetland planting, and then we're using trees that are keeping in line with the existing trees within the park. And then to the right is the Putnam Greenway. We are using white painted warning strips where the greenway intersects with pedestrians. Again, looking at the same bridge, looking south in relation to the park paths and the stream in relation to the grading, like it's lower than the park paths. So here we are looking at a view which is under Van Cortlandt Park South. This is the southern border of the park. And this overpass also acts as a portal where the project transitions from Van Cortlandt Park to the CSX corridor. So just looking at the existing conditions in the CSX corridor, it's very linear, narrow constraint. It varies in width from 60 feet to 25 feet. It's very exposed, and it also runs beneath a series of overpasses. So here in this section under 238th Street and 234th Street. This is an existing view from Van Cortlandt Park South, looking south in contrast to the dense vegetation of the park. This is very exposed. To the left-hand side is the Major Deegan Expressway, and to the right are private residential buildings. And then the blue structure that you see is the West 238th Street overpass. So before we leave Van Cortlandt Park, this is our 4th access point. Over here, we have a direct connection using stone steps from the existing park circulation. These are stone steps. We weaved it into the existing tree canopy to minimize any damage to those beautiful trees. And then we provide an alternate route at 4.5% for ADA access. Again, this is the 2nd pedestrian bridge. It's a same style as the other one that we saw. And then at this point, the Putnam Greenway shifts from the east of the stream to the left as it enters the CSX corridor. So at West 239th Street, that's our first access point within the CSX corridor. The ramp connects to an at-grade path where elevation 12 is. Since this is the widest portion of the CSX corridor at 60 feet, we were able to create an overlook at number 4. Just creating an opportunity to look over the stream corridor. And then going south, the path continues, but it becomes an elevated cast-in-place concrete structure. So again, a section of our 2nd bridge in relation to the stone steps, and then you see Van Cortlandt Park South overpass over there. And then at the 239th Street, overlook, we're looking at the overlook in relation to the landing, the stream, Major Deegan Expressway, and the high retaining wall of the Putnam Avenue. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the widest portion of the corridor at 60 feet. So here's a view of the same area. That's the overlook. We can see the fork where the ramp is coming down from West 239th Street and then continuing south. We do have native wetland planting here adjacent to the stream. And then to the left is the Major Deegan Expressway. To the right is Putnam Avenue, which is much higher. It has a retaining wall here. So we created a planted buffer to screen that wall. Moving to the southern portion of the CSX corridor, again, very linear, varies from 65 to 35 feet. It does go through beneath 4 overpasses. And then between 233rd Street and 231st Street, there are a few private properties that are low-lying. So there are issues with stormwater management over here, and I'll talk about it a little bit as we move further. Here's the existing conditions photo of that corridor. It's full of invasives. We're going to be treating them, mitigating them prior to construction. And then in this portion, south of 238th Street, this is our narrowest portion of the site at 25 feet. We were able to increase the width of the Greenway path from 10 feet to 11 feet since the conceptual design. And that's the best we could do because we had to support the hydrological needs of the stream, the path, as well as we wanted to create a slight buffer, planted buffer between the adjacent private properties and our path. And then south of 236th Street, this is where the path elevates to be at the same elevation as a private parking lot. We are anticipating a future access point connection here, but this will require negotiations with the private property owners, and we are working on it. So again, a view at West 236th Street, looking south, Major Deegan Expressway, to the left, the stream. Again, we're using native hardy shrubs here. It's a very exposed environment, so we want the planting to survive here. The elevated concrete path, and then the private parking lot. Looking at the same view north, as I mentioned earlier, we have created this planted buffer to screen the parking lot from our Greenway path and then the Deegan Expressway to the right-hand side. So here we are looking at an area which is under the West 234th Street overpass. These areas are currently dark, and we would like to animate them and make them safe. So I'm going to talk about its design as we move further. Here, since the conceptual design, we have shifted the access point from West 234th Street to 233rd Street. This does allow for a more direct connection for a typical user who's going north. And since I think it's about 50 feet in width over here, it did allow for an opportunity for the Greenway path to cross over the stream because we did have that width. And because we have the state DOT right-of-way available over here, we were able to create a robust planted buffer between the Deegan Expressway and our Greenway path. Here, we're looking at the two paths in relation to the Deegan Expressway and the existing buildings, and the corridor width is 50 feet over here. So going back to the underpass areas, we think these spaces are unique and provide a good place for temporary art installations. So as part of our contract, we are paving the area that's adjacent to the Greenway path using cast-in-place concrete pavement. And then what you see in red, brown is the wall of the underpass. We're going to be preparing them, painting them so they could become locations for murals or art installations. And then talking about, I mentioned the low-lying properties. These are the private properties that are low-lying in this area, and they do have issues with stormwater. So Because of those low-lying properties, we shifted the location at which the stream is channelized, and it goes into a closed channel slightly north of those properties, and that allowed us to create a bioretention area and capture that stormwater. So again, this is where the stream goes from being daylit into a closed channel and then find with its outfall in the Harlem River. We do have an elevated deck at number 2. This does allow for a pause moment outside of the main circulation flow for this greenway. And we are working on citing the interpretive signage in this project, but this could be one location where it can go, and the possible content would be just explaining how the daylit stream goes into a channel and then finally into the Harlem River. And then the last section of the plan, as Gail mentioned earlier, we have added one more access point at West 230th Street. Again, it does extend the greenway by another block and allows for a more direct connection to the existing greenway network. Verville Place stays. It does have pedestrian access and does allow limited vehicular access for maintenance purposes. Just as the beginning of the project, I mentioned about entrances having a common kit of parts. This one has the same thing with benches, trash receptacles, bicycle racks, and signage. And then here's a view from the West 230th Street overpass looking south, with the big box building to the left, a planted buffer, the elevated path, and the Major Deegan Expressway. I did forget to mention that all elevated paths within the project have the aluminum guardrail. And we chose this because it's suited well for wet environments, and Parks has had great success using it at the Rockaway Beach. So just in terms of site pavement for the whole project, all at-grade paths within the project are either full depth asphalt or porous asphalt. There was a path that I mentioned above the historic dam at Mill Pond. We are using compacted crushed stone with diamond grid to minimize any damage to the historic dam. Again, painted warning stripes where the greenway is crossing with pedestrians. All access point entrances will have hex pavers. The overlooks within the project will have bluestone slab pavement. And then the staircase at the southern end of Van Cortlandt Park will be stone steps with exposed aggregate concrete landings. In terms of site furnishings within the CSX corridor, we are using a more modern bench, the 1964 World's Fair bench with RPL slats, gray in color. Within Van Cortlandt Park, we're using the 1939 World's Fair bench with RPL slats. That's keeping in line with what's already there in the park. And then both within Van Cortlandt Park and CSX corridor, we are using the standard trash receptacle and the standard DOT bike rack, which is a city rack. For lighting, within Van Cortlandt Park, we are using the same B-pole with the Riverside luminaire. This is what's there in the park right now. And for the CSX corridor, we are using the pedestrian scale davit pole, which is well suited to the urban environment, as well as it has the ability to direct light on the pathways. Here's an example of the East Midtown Greenway, where it's been recently installed. Again, that project's very similar to ours. It's linear, adjacent to a highway and a water body. And then for the spaces under the bridges, we are using the standard DOT under deck fixture, but we just like to arrange it in a pattern and use a little bit more so that we can create these spaces with sufficient light and have them feel safe. For fences and gates across the project, as I mentioned earlier, I primary railing in the project is the aluminum guardrail. All paths that are either adjacent to the water or where it's elevated are using the aluminum guardrail. At the stone steps, we have the pipe handrail. The overlook at Mill Pond has the black painted steel railing. All entrances, access points within the project have the standard parks steel picket fence. Again, just to announce that this is you're entering parkland. And there is limited or like sparing use of the chain link fence as well as bollards, which is primarily to control access. So I'm not going to go too much into these diagrams. They're very detailed, but just if you see the solid red line is where the path is elevated, and that's where we have the aluminum guardrail. And we can look at these in more detail later if you have questions, but I'll switch to signage now. So we are using the standard parks entrance signage with the logo, park name, and the park rules. Interpretive signage, we're still working on what locations they will go in. But the idea is to place them strategically, not overwhelm the user, and site them in places where there's a pause moment across the greenway and you can stop and read what's written. There's going to be greenway signage and then ADA access signage across the project. And in terms of public art, we are considering future artwork to be coordinated with DOT art program and the NYC Parks Art in the Parks program. The spaces under the bridges would really benefit from animating them and making them feel safe, well lit, and just a place where you can stop across the greenway. And we do anticipate working with the agencies as well as the community for this artwork. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gail to quickly go over the planting approach.
Okay, so we're in the final stretch of our Greenway tour. The planting, as we've kind of reiterated throughout the project, they're very different environments. The Van Cortlandt Park is very shady and lush, and CSX is very hot and overexposed. The planting zones follow the hydrological conditions within the corridor. Immediately adjacent to the stream is only herbaceous plants that are adapted to constant inundation. The next zone is kind of the biggest plant palette, if you will, in the floodplain, so that they can tolerate both drought and inundation. In Van Cortlandt Park, they're more shade tolerant plants, given the existing tree canopy, and then the upland forest within Van Cortlandt Park. As Ankita mentioned, we're planting similar species already found in the park, pin oak, red maple, tulip tree, big canopy trees that are already in the park. So we're really trying to knit the greenway into its adjacent ecological context. And I will say we've met frequently with NRG. It's been an incredibly collaborative process on the plant list, and learning from their lessons learned and other wetland projects within the park, and really making sure that this is the toughest possible palette. Here's a cross section looking at those three planting zones that relate to the stream hydrology, and a snapshot of those species. As I mentioned, pin oak, liquid ambar, swamp white oak, canopy trees. In the floodplain, both in the CSX corridor and Van Cortlandt Park, there are common species. Almost all of these understory plants were chosen for their stoloniferous root systems. That is, they can hold the slope. And then the wetland species that always have their feet wet. In the CSX corridor, there are also these three zones with the addition of the fourth zone, the bioretention area, as we mentioned, necessary to prevent water from going to the adjacent property. So there'll be a deep underground storage area for water and a shallow bioretention planting on top of that. There are common species in both areas. One thing we also did was to use fastigiate tree species along those high walls. So you can get pin oak and red maple that you have in the park in a fastigiate form. So it'll be the same species, but in upright form. a kind of a really good use of fastigiate species here, given the height of the walls that are adjacent to the corridor and the narrowness of the planted area. So here you can see a cross section of the CSX corridor with the open channel on the left and with just the greenway path and the buried channel on the right. Here a snapshot of those species, again corresponding to the hydrological zones. The trees in the corridor a little tougher, hackberry, something you can pretty much plant anywhere in the city. Red maples, the fastigiate form of pin oak, and black cherry, and sumac, one of my favorite all-around species, which will definitely compete with the invasives that are there now. So here it is, an overview of the whole corridor and greenway, and we're here to answer questions, clarify, give more detail on anything that you would be interested in knowing. I believe there's also some public testimony. So
Thank you for that presentation. Shreyoshi, do we have in-person public testimony?
I am not seeing any in-person testimony. Rebecca, do we have any remote testimony?
Yes, we do. We have some people signed up and some additional on the line. I'll start with calling names in the order that we received them in our Google sign-up sheet. So first is Karen Argenti. I just requested to unmute. Please accept the request.
Right.
Thank you. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I already submitted a letter, but I just wanted to make sure that I had a few words to say to the commission. Thank you so much for hearing this. This is a really important project for our community. I guess I know Gail longer than I know the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook, but I've been working on this project since the late 90s. It's really important for our community and for the park and for a piece of land that who knows what other the use would be. I am a member of the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality, but we submitted separate testimony. I'm talking based on my own experience with this project. We're very happy that the DEP and the Parks Department has worked together with the community on many different aspects that like probably one group or another wouldn't have thought of. So it's a real collaborative, multi-project purpose project proposal. And I do want to say that it has also become a model, which you might see from my testimony, my document testimony that I sent in, that there is stories about our project in Boston and as far away as Paris. And people are looking at this as a model to duplicate in other areas where they have buried streams. And I guess my last statement is that this is going to do, not only it's not just multi-purpose, but is also going to give us clean water, clean air, and clean land. And that we have a greenway that's an eco greenway, which is a greenway that works with nature to clean the water on the edge, on the top of the greenway, as opposed to just a strict asphalt or concrete pavement. And I do want to say that the area that surrounds most of the new parkland, which goes outside the park, the CXS corridor, is mostly in an EJ corridor. And this becomes a very significant way for people to get places and also to be introduced to nature if they, haven't been before. So thank you so much for letting me speak. And you can reference my letter that I sent last week sometime.
Thank you so much. Next signed up, we have Robert Fanuzzi, who I don't see on Zoom. Robert Fanuzzi, if you're logged in under a different name, please turn on your camera or use the raise your hand feature. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next. Okay, next we have Laura Spalter. Please accept the request to unmute. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Laura Spalter, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Broadway Community Alliance in support of the Tibbetts Brook Daylighting and Putnam Greenway project. As former chair of Bronx Community Board 8 and longtime chair of its Environment and Sanitation Committee, I have been involved with this project for more than 25 years. The new linear park between Van Cortlandt Park South and West 230th Street will benefit the underserved Broadway and Kingsbridge community enormously. The project presented today reflects incredible planning and execution on the part of DEP and DPR. They have worked tirelessly with the community to solve a myriad of challenges. Today, we see the fruits of their labor. Although there are many excellent features of this project, today I am only commenting on 3. First, after the conceptual plan, we asked for an attractive greenway design that incorporated and enhanced park features for the safe recreational enjoyment of residents. They did that. Second, we asked for a greenway design with multiple access points to Broadway, our main commercial corridor, in order to enhance economic development for our merchants and businesses. They did that. Third, for many years, the community has advocated for the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook, bringing the brook back to the surface instead of totally burying it underground. Currently, during and after large rain events, the large volume of clean water from Tibbetts Brook overwhelms the Wards Island storm water treatment plant infrastructure beyond its capacity. This causes raw sewage to be discharged into the Harlem River, violating the Clean Water Act and contributing to an environmental and public health hazard. Daylighting will also help reduce serious flooding that occurs locally along the Broadway corridor, a perennial problem of great concern. We all recognize that a project of this magnitude is a work in progress and will take many years to complete. We urge the Public Design Commission to approve the project so that DEP and DPR may proceed. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. I see Robert Fanuzzi has now joined. Please accept the request to unmute. I will just say before you start, the next signed up is Julie Reyes, who I don't see on the Zoom either. Julie Reyes, if you're tuning in on YouTube, please join the Zoom so you can testify next. Thank you, Robert. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm pleased to give the enthusiastic support of the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality to the construction of a greenway and daylighting of Tibbetts Brook for the PDC this morning. This represents the culmination of over 30 years of advocacy by BCEQ to create a continuous greenway starting in Van Cortlandt Park. We celebrate this project for its completion of the Putnam Greenway within the boundaries of Van Cortlandt Park. There are new natural resources created, new environmental controls and protections for natural resources within the park, as well as enhanced citizen access that really make this improvement to Van Cortlandt Park historic. There will now be a Putnam Greenway from the border of the park to the end of the park. Furthermore, we find that this preliminary design has gone leapfrogged over many generations of park planning and actually extended natural resources into the urban fabric, as I stated in my letter. This has incredible opportunity to produce co-benefits for an EJ community in Kingsbridge and Marble Hill. We are completely in favor of this approach, which recreates the historic forest that once proliferated throughout this area. There are trees, there are canopies, there are understories, and there are streams. This design actually works with the vestigial trail of Tibbetts Brook to recreate that urban forest. We believe that the success of this project will make this area a focal point of new design interest activity, both for New York City and internationally. We also are thrilled that we are able to help not only clean and improve the water flow of Van Cortlandt Lake with a new stream, but also improve the water quality of Van Cortlandt Park. So this design actually has civic benefits that benefit the community and help advance long-held priorities of Bronx Council environmental quality for clean, accessible waterways. We thank DEP and DPR for their outreach and inclusion of our perspectives. They have worked closely with community organizations to create a multifaceted environmental greenway that we believe is one of the most original in the city of New York at this time. We thank you for your comments and urge approval of this preliminary application. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, CB Chairperson Race, for joining. I see your raised hand. Next, we have CM Eric Dinowitz. Please accept the request to unmute. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I wanted to join today to support this really exciting project, the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook, and I'm urging the commission to approve this design. Community members and groups have been working to make this vision a reality for years, decades, and this is an incredibly important project that touches on some of the biggest issues facing our city and the Bronx. You've heard it again and again, the issue of combined sewage overflow, that's polluted water emptying directly into our freshwater system, but also during storms, the basements of nearby buildings experience water coming up from the pipes due to the pressure on our sewer system. And this project will certainly relieve that pressure on the surrounding houses and buildings that share that combined sewer. And by the way, I don't know if they mentioned it in the presentation, but this is along the area, the part of the Major Deegan that flooded roughly 2 years ago, and where entire cars were swallowed up by the flooding. People had to abandon their cars. So that's the area we're talking about. But there are other issues at play too. You know, we're talking about a housing crisis, and every time a new development is being proposed in my community, a big concern is how that building and how our sewer system will handle all the incoming water that's going to be used by the new building. And developments are happening in an area where we know they're going to overflow right into the basements of these new buildings. There's a new school being built, so that's going to create a lot of extra pressure on our sewer system. But this project's also especially important. This is in an environmental justice area going right near two NYCHA developments. And we're talking about the Bronx, opening up more green space, allowing bike network. This green space is especially critical in the Bronx, where we have lack of access to the green space and we have the highest rates of asthma. You know, Bronxites deserve better quality of life, less flooding, more access to green space, access to the bike network, and New Yorkers overall deserve cleaner waterways. So again, I thank you for allowing me to speak, and I urge the commission to vote yes.
Thank you so much. Next, we have CB Chairperson Julie Reyes. Please accept the request to unmute.
Good afternoon.
Hi, yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm sorry. Good morning.
No problem.
Good morning, Commissioner Martin and members of the commission. My name is Julie Reyes, Chairperson of Community Board 8 in the Bronx. On behalf of the board, I urge the Public Design Commission to approve the submission by DEP and DPR for the Tibbetts Brook Daylighting and Putnam Green Lake project. After careful review by our Environment and Sanitation and Parks committees, a resolution strongly supporting this project was passed at the full board meeting held on June 29th, 2023. It was sent to the Public Design Commission on June 30th this year. Bronx Community Board has a long history of supporting daylighting Tibbetts Brook and construction of the Putnam Greenway. In 2016 and 2017 and 18, the board passed supportive resolutions citing this project's unique recreational, economic, and environmental benefits for our Marble Hill and Kingsbridge communities and in the Bronx. In approving the submission, the resolution notes that former concerns have sufficiently been addressed. However, it recommends use of porous materials in order to maximize natural absorption and drainage capacity, and where feasible, noise mitigation measures to alleviate noise impacts from the major Deegan Expressway. This is a critically important project. Our resolution states that Bronx Community Board 8 considers this project an example of innovative, sustainable, and equitable design of public spaces and civic structures, and highly appreciates the responsiveness of DEP and DPR teams to community feedback. We recognize that a project of this scope and magnitude will take years, and we look forward to continued updates and dialogue with DEP, DPR, and our elected officials as the project progresses. It is our hope that the Public Design Commission approves this project. Thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Next, we have Chauncey Young. Please accept the request to unmute. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, yes. Good morning. My name is Chauncey Young. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Harlem River Working Group. We also partner with Bronx Council for Environmental Quality and are part of the New York City Greenway Coalition. I want to, first say that we 100% support this project, have been actively participating in all community events along with this project, as well as in the advisory committee, and feel that there's an incredible amount of collaboration between the departments on this, and this Greenway and daylighting project is not only a model, as Karen shared earlier, for New York State, but a model nationally and internationally. I believe it is the largest daylighting project currently in the United States. And the porous pavement used wherever possible can be a new design goal for greenways across the city. I want to mention that while this project ends at 230th Street, it is going to be a part of the larger Harlem River Greenway project, connecting communities from Randall's Island up to Van Cortlandt Park. So this is incredibly important, not only for Community Boards 8 and 7, but also for all of our southern communities, Community Board 5, 4, 1, and will create an important link into the New York State Empire Trail, the largest multi-use trail system in our state and one of the largest in the country. So this is extremely important on so many levels in terms of equity. It will stop flooding to local communities. It will help connect folks to the Harlem River and bring back a historic river back to its communities. I do want to note that we have a issue that is outside of the scope of this. From 230th to 225th Street was part of the original design decades ago, and MTA, who owns that property, does not seem to be willing to cooperate with the city, and that is very important if we can make this greenway go further south, because the exit at 225th Street will get us directly to the Harlem River, where 230th Street is a dangerous street to get out on with off-ramps to Deegan Expressway. So we 100% support this idea, and we hope that the city agencies can work together with MTA to get that southern section. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next signed up, we have Margaret Groark. I'm not seeing Margaret on the line. If you're logged in on YouTube, please join the Zoom. In the meantime, while we wait, there are some other people on the Zoom. Does anyone else wish to testify? If so, please turn on your video or use the raise your hand feature. Okay, great. Camelia Tepoulos. Excuse my pronunciation. Yep, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Camelia Tepoulos. I'm a resident of Community Board 8, and also I happen to have been this previous year chair of the Environment and Sanitation Committee resolution, having been referred by the chair of CB8. But I just want to add my voice to the series of outstanding testimonies that you've heard. From my perspective as an economic development professional in the Bronx, the Kingsbridge Commercial Corridor that is immediately parallel to the proposed project site is very important for the Community Board 8. And we know that those businesses have been heavily impacted by literally decades of chronic flooding affecting them related to the insufficient drainage capacity along the Deegan and along the Broadway corridor. I'm myself the executive director of the Morris Park bid in East Bronx, but the Kingsbridge bid corridor runs along this projected site. And not so again, I just want to emphasize here not only the important environmental focus of this project that CB8 pioneered and brought forward in this resolution of support, but also to highlight with all of you how important the impact of this project will be in attracting visitors and creating green space, but also supporting the viability and the sustainability of the local businesses along the Broadway corridor here in Kingsbridge. I also just want to add my, just simply as a resident, my tremendous thanks to again the responsiveness that we saw from DEP, DPR over the last years, how collaborative and how strongly they communicated with us as community board and with all the other nonprofit organizations and environmental advocates. And we saw indeed a significant enhancement of their proposal from previous versions, and just want to express my appreciation to all of you and our plea of support to the commission in the hope that you will approve continuation of this project that will be a tremendous value for the local area. And as Chauncey pointed out, continuing the vision of a long greenway that will align with the Harlem River and make the Bronx better integrated to the greenways system of the entire city. So thank you again very much for the opportunity and appreciating your work in reviewing this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm still not seeing Margaret Gork on the line, who was the last person signed up on our sheet. But if there are additional folks who'd like to testify, Christina Taylor, yep, please accept the request to unmute.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Christina Taylor. I'm Deputy Director for the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance. I just want to say that the Alliance is proud to be an active partner in the planning and design process alongside New York City Parks and DEP. We stand behind the plan that's being presented, that was presented to the Public Design Commission, and look forward to the next steps that will bring the city's largest green infrastructure project to fruition for our Bronx community. I have personally been advocating for the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook for the last 20 years, so I'm very happy that we have gotten this far and can't wait to see the final project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, I think that concludes our public testimony for the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to everyone who testified. We appreciate very much hearing your perspective on this project. Commissioners, any questions or yes, Jimmy.
So I just want to say, whoever did community engagement on this, incredible job. This is by far the most number of people who've ever testified since I've been a member of the commission. And the first elected official to testify since I've been on the commission, which is not surprising from my former colleague, Councilmember Dinowitz, but also very good for this commission and our process that we would have elected officials appearing and recognizing this process and being an important part of the process. So I know that my fellow commissioners will have more questions and comments maybe on the technical piece of it, but I just want to say this is an amazing project. It's very exciting that this is happening for the Bronx, and obviously the work that you all have done in sort of getting the support and the buy-in from folks from the community who've been involved for 25 years and 20 years is testament to how much work you've done and put into it. So it's just incredibly exciting to see this happening for the Bronx.
Thank you so much. I echo Jimmy's comments. I think it's great to see how the community fully supports the project. They've been seeing the project develop over so many years, and it's great that it's gotten to this level of almost concreteness. So that's great. I also think it's a great project for New York City, and I'm really excited that this can be a model for future daylighting in New York City, but also around the country. So I think as a premise, the project is fantastic. I think the layout of the pathway, it's very successful. I recognize it's a very tight, constrained space with limited access points. You're trying to prioritize the brook, the planting. So I think from that perspective, the layout is very successful. And I think also the planting approach on how you develop, different segments that speak to the amount of water the different species are going to get, how you are intelligently using fastigiate trees to screen adjacent properties. I think all of that is very successful. I do have some questions or comments related to the detailing of the project that I want you to consider in earnest, mostly because I understand that there's potentially a large part of your energy has gone into the layout and the planting, which are the critical bones of the project. And I think it's in a good enough place where maybe some of the architectural features could use a little bit more refinement. When we look at a project like this, it only has a couple of elements, right? It has railings, paving, lighting, a few benches, and it also has very limited access points, which puts a lot more pressure on these architectural elements, because as you're accessing the greenway from these few moments that are bringing you from very different neighborhoods, you want the space to be recognizable as its own, as something that continues on either side, and people really feel, okay, I am in a truly public space, which again puts so much weight on those elements. So starting with some of them, the first comment I have is towards lighting. If I understand correctly, I think you're using the B pole on Van Cortlandt Park because that is part of the vocabulary of that park, correct? Which makes sense. As we move into the greenway and you're using the davit pole, I worry a little bit that because the path is so close to the expressway, that the pole starts reading like an expressway pole, even though it's lower in scale and the lanes are intended to be for pedestrians. Architecturally, it feels like part of the infrastructure of the highway as opposed to something where you want to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. So I suggest you relook at that and see how the selection of the pole, again, contributes architecturally to distinguish this from the highway or from a purely infrastructural space, because I think this has a lot going for it as a greenway in itself, as a pedestrian and bicycle space. The second question I have is about pavement. You're mentioning that the elevated walkways are going to be cast in place concrete. Can you speak a little bit more about the tectonics of that? Like, how are you supporting the cast in place? Have you engineered the elevated walkway?
So I'm going to ask Dahlia Thompson from Hazen to answer that question, and she's on Zoom. So Rebecca, could you find Dahlia and unmute her? She can speak to that
Yes,
issue.
please, Dahlia, accept the request to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, my wrong camera is, let me see.
We can see you, Dahlia.
Okay, sorry. The elevated greenway is a structurally designed structurally designed all throughout. We have two piers, posts generally supporting the elevated structure, and it's a similar design through the ramp as well, the access points at 230th Street and 233rd Street. So it will look unified in nature, between those two. And the key point also is, part of the constraints in the design, we're making sure that the posts of the elevated pathway, we're not interfering with the hydraulics of the stream, so that we're not creating maintenance issues with potential debris against the posts. But also we didn't want to cover the stream with our greenway. We wanted to make, so we're balancing those efforts.
So the posts are concrete piers right now?
Yes.
And then what is supporting the cast in place concrete deck, or what are you casting the concrete on?
It's going to be, it will all be poured in place, the whole structure. So there'll be, at the time that there'll be beams, integrated into that as necessary, and yeah. But you won't see the beams. It will look like a concrete structure.
So it's basically, it's similar to your renderings. Basically, you're just going to read a thickened concrete edge. You're not going to see any substructure, steel decking underneath, nothing.
No, it will all be within the steel. Within the concrete. The steel will all be within the concrete.
How are you managing the water on that concrete deck? Is it sloped towards the creek?
Yes, it's a 2% slope towards the creek. 1 to 2%, varies at times, but slope towards towards the stream.
And the finish of the concrete, are you doing anything special, or is it like finish?
I can't speak for sure on that. I'm not the structural engineer, but I believe that the balance is trying to, we don't want a too smooth a finish. We want to make sure that it's not a slippery surface for the bikers if it's raining.
Yeah, it'll be a brushed finish, and we're working on the construction documents, looking at how the scoring joints work so that the path reads in a continuous fashion, and where there's an overlook, there'll be either a different material or a different scoring pattern. As Ankita talked about, the underbridge areas are paved, but we're doing a more dense scoring pattern in those areas, so that at least you understand that those are separate from the greenway, because that will get a lot of traffic and a lot of use. So really kind of using that as a cue to what's within the flow versus what's in the greenway proper.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great way to treat, something that may be pretty simple, but at a different level of detail and design, playing with the scoring pattern, also to break a little bit of the scale and the length of this and give it more of a rhythm. I heard a lot of community members encourage the use of porous paving or permeable paving. I know you have some in limited areas here. Can you speak a little bit more about strategically where it's being used besides the stone fines, which I understand are more of a restoration, and who will be maintaining this, and what is the overall appetite for porous paving? Because we all know it's great. It has great environmental benefits, but it also requires significantly more maintenance than other
So we're just using it. So asphalt is only in the at-grade portions of the project, and that is primarily within Van Cortlandt Park. So only in the areas within the park where we're not impacting tree roots or adjacent to part of the stream structure itself, because of the amount of excavation that you need for the porous pavement. So wherever we can excavate as deep as is required, that's where it will go. So primarily, I would say it's in these kind of southern portions of the greenway within Van Cortlandt Park. We did pass this through parks and the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, and I think everyone's on board with the porous pavement. And over time, it the means to vacuum it and such will be there. It also does flush out if it's done properly on its own. So I think it'll be designed to function if it clogs or not, and hopefully it can be vacuumed once in a blue moon.
I think for a project like this that has such aspirational value in terms of ecology, water management, obviously the use of porous pavement where it makes sense, it's great, but it does come with the downside that if it's not properly maintained, or say it's very well maintained for the
next 10 years, and then it's let go a little bit, its failure can actually be quite catastrophic, right? Because you haven't designed proper drainage for the area. So it's just more of a question and an idea that if this project does become a model for this kind of implementation through the city, that it would be a great place to utilize this and make sure it works well and is highlighted to the community. And then my last series of questions and comments have to do with just the overall railings along the project. You have a photo there that shows all the different types, and there's quite a lot, right? We have what is historic on Van Cortlandt, and I understand there's an interest to either restore it or add to it. But then we have the bridges that seem to be at least rendered more of weathering steel type of material with a truss. Then we have the aluminum rails along the walkway. And then we have the typical picket fences for gates. And when you look at it all together, it really looks like an odd collection of materials and design vocabularies. So I think for me, that is the area where I would encourage you to do a little bit more of a careful eye and perhaps clean up to see what elements can come together. I know they're all standards, but in a space that's so limited, it feels like a lot. And especially the aluminum rail along the walkway, it's quite heavy. I mean, when you go to the Rockaways, it works because the Rockaways is a very broad boardwalk. It's open to the sky. There's no buildings, there's no trees. So that railing kind of recedes a little. But when you have an 11-foot wide path with that railing on both sides, it feels very like imposing, I would say. It's just heavy. I understand the use of aluminum, and I think it's great that aluminum has proven to be a great material for maintenance purposes and exposure to water. But that railing on top of the bridges, on top of the gates, on top of Van Cortlandt railings just feels like it's lacking. So I would encourage you to look at that a little more closely. I think if aluminum is the right material, that's great. And I have seen it work very, very well. But maybe the architectural design can be lightened up a little bit so that people can really enjoy the planting, the creek, and be less confined by this guardrail, which is strong.
Okay.
Okay, so I know we can spend a lot of time here, but it's a very important project. So I commend you, and I agree with my fellow commissioners who have spoken already. I wanted to touch on some things that maybe haven't been mentioned. So I also, I don't want to repeat Isabel's points, which I agree with wholeheartedly, but thinking about the continuity and how important that is, the issue of continuity on the project. And, you know, the largest daylighting project in the US, it's incredible, incredibly exciting. So, I mean, I'm wondering, you know, the kind of overlay between the daylighting concept and the design concept, not that they're separate, but, you know, you've got this very long piece of design. So first question, how long is it?
The Greenway itself is 1.2 miles.
So 1.2 miles, and then it's a certain area. So it goes from 25 feet to.
Right, so the narrowest portions are 25, the widest in the corridor are 60, and then in the park, it's up to 120.
60 to
It's
120.
double that.
Okay, so you've got these different sections. So now I'm kind of thinking conceptually about what this is and how different activities and overlaps happen at those points. So in terms of that concept, and you had a drawing earlier where you showed these different areas, you identify them as the narrow portion. I can't remember what you actually called them, but right.
So there's the CSX corridor, which is the railroad, right? CSX Railroad.
Right.
So
You had them labeled some, I mean.
Yeah.
Right. But you had called one the narrow, this is how we're designing. I know it was one of your earlier slides. You don't have to go back to it, but.
The existing conditions plan?
Yeah, the reason I'm bringing it up is I'm wondering about your implementation and your schedule and how this all gets, how it happens, because it's all like some stuff is there, some stuff isn't there. And I'm thinking about other really fantastic projects that the city has done, like the High Line and like Brooklyn Bridge Park. and the different ways in which those were implemented over time, you know, having to do with the context of those projects, you know, when Highline starting from the south and moving north, and then Brooklyn Bridge Park, if I'm not mistaken, started at either end and came together, right? It was a really interesting way that I thought, you know, that this was implemented. So you kind of stake the edges, and I mean, I'm sure there were other reasons for this. So I'm wondering about your schedule and your implementation and where things, you know, where the money goes and when. So we didn't see a schedule.
You should have a schedule
You should have-
in your
it'd be great to
notes.
see that, and it'd be great to understand it in terms of the concept.
Yeah. So are you asking just whether the construction will be phased? Because it is all under one construction contract.
Yes. I mean, it's so big. It's like
It's
one
long.
giant thing and
It's long.
everybody is everywhere at once. No. So yeah, I'm wondering how it's phased and how that relates to the concept and what you're trying to achieve. I mean, of course, there are reasons why the contract, you know, whoever's doing all this work, you know, does A and B. But you also have a concept about what's important to you all and to the community, right? So just want to open that up a little bit. It's a big, I know you don't, you probably can't answer it here, but I just wonder how those things fit together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, one of the things that I love this project because it does so many things, right? Like it checks so many boxes, all of which are really important for New York City, right? We've got our environmental and public health issues. We've got our recreational and transportation and cultural issues. We're trying to solve for all of that at once. And I think this is a really special project in that it is able to do that. It's also unique because we're taking this corridor, which has just sort of been fallow for quite some time and really transforming it. But we've also got this historic park in Van Cortlandt Park, which is very well used and has its own legacy. So we're trying to combine all of this stuff. And I think that is one of the reasons that it makes it a very exciting project. It is all under one contract in terms of the construction. If you want to understand a little bit more about the construction sequencing, maybe Dahlia is prepared to speak to that a little bit more, so I can turn it over to her.
And it is, I think one thing is to also remember, like, the hydrological design is a really big design driver here.
Right.
The challenge of getting the water to go by gravity from the Mill Pond to the Harlem River wasn't as simple as just drawing a high point and a low point. It is actually very shallow because there's existing infrastructure further south in the corridor that doesn't allow a steeper slope. So the hydrological design really does set a lot of the parameters that we had to dance around. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. And it is one project from the pond to the river, and being the construction documents include everything, including south of here, where it's just a buried channel within the Metro North jurisdiction where there'll be an easement. In terms of I will mention the planting. We've talked internally about that a lot, because right now it's gravel, it's invasives, and how do you make it look like the renderings, right? So we've talked about pre-treatment, removal of soil, treatment again, really curating the soils. There's a lot into the techniques of this. So the soil preparation is extremely important to the entire project. And we've thought about maybe using the Clean Soil Bank. Are there ways to make this, even on other levels, have a good environmental impact? So I think in terms of the pre-construction, there's a lot of thought going into what the post conditions for the plant material will be, in addition to the grading, the very tricky fine grading for the stream corridor, which will be wet 365 days a year. And also, thinking of maintenance, this is 100% publicly funded and 100% publicly maintained. And so this is, it has to kind of withstand that kind of, I think maintenance is part of ecology. It has to withstand that too. So we've considered that quite a bit. I don't know if that answers your construction questions. And
well, I was just more asking about how you guys see. I don't think you can necessarily answer this here, but I'd love to see and understand how it gets implemented, when and where. And I understand because this 1.2 mile length also varies in depth, right? Your sections are very interesting, and you show kind of low and high water, but so you're trying to contain this water from a very tight area to a very wide area, and it's you know, it's so interesting and important for the public to understand
Mhm.
that with how you're taking it all in, right? But over time in implementation, because you're going to design and implement areas over time. It's certain areas more important than others. And this kind of scale of the thing, right? The scale of the thing versus given that implementation.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, Talia can speak maybe a little bit more specifically about the schedule and the construction sequencing, if that's helpful.
Can I say one thing? Am I allowed
Yeah,
to talk?
I just want to make sure. When you see Dahlia, oh, I think she just dropped. I think she froze. So hopefully she'll be joining back.
Okay, I just want to add just one thing. Just, this is Karen Argenti. The Parks Barn has a good experience with this kind of a project. They did the Putnam Trail inside the park, and that was very delicate surrounding wetlands, and they did have to access in two different ways depending on what they were doing. And so I think that, you know, that was pretty much run by a whole bunch of people in the Parks Department and as well as a contractor, and they really did a wonderful job there. And we worked closely with them on that, the community people and community groups. So I just wanted to say that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Manuel, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the comments about continuity, and I think a good term for it is identity. In a way, like a sense of identity across these different fragments of, you know, urban experience or urban conditions. You know, you're next to the freeway, you're in a park, you're going through a neighborhood, and so the linearity, I think, gives it a sense of continuity. But you know, I think Isabel said too, like, you know, I feel like on some of the screens that we're looking at, it seems just like palettes, and so I feel like what I'm looking for is like, what's the sense of like overall continuity across these different conditions? And that doesn't necessarily mean signage, but I think that could be a part of it, because you need the sense when you're on the trail that you're on it and you're continuing on it. But there's something, you know, about the entry points too, or the entry nodes as well, where, you know, before you get to it, you have a sense of like you're entering into this, you know, into this link. And then beyond that too, you know, recognizing that it's a part of, you know, multiple systems, the park system, NYC Parks, it's part of like the Harlem Greenway, and, you know, it leads to the Empire State Trail. And so, you know, how to do that in an uncluttered way, I think is important to think about too. So I think that'd be good to see in like further, you know,
we continue
future.
signage proposals. Back to share that.
Mhm. Okay.
I'll say something about signage and there's so much to tell here, right? It's got so many layers to it. So we have thought about the locations, like where are the moments within the park where you tell that story. And I think obviously where it goes, you know, where it's daylit, where it goes into the channel, perhaps something about the Putnam Railroad, which, you know, it was, you know, the primary transportation corridor here for 100 years. So I think the interpretation is important at key areas that also tell about the broader hydrology. It can talk about the watershed, you know, it can talk about areas beyond the project. Same thing with the Putnam Rail. It can talk about, you know, urban ecology. So there's a lot of broader things that can be shared in interpretation. So I think that's one aspect that we will continue to develop for sure.
Is there like a name for this area, or is it a named park, or is it not? It's
So
called
that's
Tibbetts.
still in discussion with the Parks Department internally. So it is on. So yeah, that's still under discussion with the Parks Department. But like you're saying, there are a lot of layers here. And so that's certainly something that's top of mind.
Also, the underbridge areas, we've said that's where art can happen. It could be 5 artists, it could be 1 artist that does something in sequence. It could be, you know, there's a lot of potential in, you know, that's a blank canvas. And I think that could be a really interesting layer that makes this unique, right? That you have the story told through art. It might change, it might give you a reason to go back because the artist is different. So I think that layer, once the stream is running and the plants are planted, is like a whole other opportunity to give it something that makes it unique. I mean, it is, the materials are fairly utilitarian, right? It's concrete, asphalts, it's the place that's special. It's the stream. It's the way that it kind of carves its way through the Bronx in this, this green thread. So,
But I think I would again say, like, I think even with utilitarian details, you can do something that is very unique to the project that makes it stand out and makes it recognizable amongst other projects in New York City. And I think signage also can bring a lot to it beyond, I mean, you obviously need directional signage because you're on a line, and as on a line, you need to know if I'm headed this way, I'm headed this way or the other. You need signage that alerts cyclists and pedestrians of each other. And obviously interpretive signage, can have a lot of play here because of the great way in which this is a performative project. But I would also like to encourage you to think about signage as something that's fully integrated to the project. A sign doesn't need to be a freestanding sign. And on a case like this, it could even not feel right because it's so simple in terms of its elements. So could signage be incorporated into the pavement that goes beyond your alerting cyclists and pedestrians of each other? Could you incorporate information about plant species or future birds or things you can see throughout? Can it point you to key view corridors if there are some, especially towards the park? Can it be on the lookout points incorporated into the guardrails? So again, it just adds an extra level of interest. I think there's so many opportunities here, and I just want to make sure the signage doesn't feel like an add-on, but something that really contributes to the architecture of the space.
Is this first time, setting aside the Blue Belt and Staten Island at parks, is daylighting a stream within the city?
I believe it
It
is
is,
the
right?
first, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so speaking as a former NRG staffer, I want to say that I remember talking about this kind of thing so long ago with like Eric Rothstein and Mart Larson and other people, and it seemed like a dream that could never happen. So I really just want to applaud that this is happening. I mean, we're only able to comment on it now because it's so real to us, right? We can see what will happen. And as I believe Karen Argenti pointed out, it's a model. It's the first, someone else pointed out, it's the first in the nation. It's DEP's biggest, right, such project. And it goes through environmental justice zones. So what I'm wondering is, I think I applaud the soil treatment. And I'm going to set aside questions of litter removal because we're not talking about that right now. But we are talking about the plant palette. And what I'm wondering is, and I think it's exceptionally thorough that you're just removing the soil because that seed bed is what it is. But what I'm wondering is, what are Parks plans for, or the team's recommendations? Because there will be a period where many invasives will again make this look like a neglected place, and you won't be able to understand the kind of like urban miracle that this actually is, and without enhanced maintenance for like 10 years. So I'm wondering, what is your recommendation on that?
Well, we also have Mitchell Loring here from the Parks Department. Do you want to take that
Maybe
question?
you could speak to that because it's going to require a lot.
Yeah, and again, those kind of details about how exactly maintenance and operations would move forward for this project, which is unique, being one of the first to ever happen, are still under development. But we have all that in mind. Like you mentioned, Mart Larson, she's fully embedded into this project too.
Great.
So we have the right people at Parks thinking about this. And like those details are still being developed, exactly how to best maintain, and the plantings in particular, which are specialized and this unique corridor. But Gail, I don't know, is there any thinking right now from the design side about?
Actually, we're not cutting, we're just filling to change the
Mm.
grade. And I think I've been extremely conscious of the same issue, right? And it's really working with Parks and NRG on, what are the absolute, of the 10 plants that you use all the time, what are the 3 toughest ones? And so they have to literally be like roadside natives. So like sumac, the baccharis, like these are things that grow at the hackberry. These are things that grow at the beach. They grow.
Yeah,
They grow between the cracks. Like, so we kind of are honing the plant palette to be the absolute toughest plants it can be. That said, they still need help during establishment. One of the things we're doing in Van Cortlandt Park, which I think will contribute both aesthetically and to the viability of the planting, is we're doing multiple species of different size, the same species, but at multiple sizes. So we'll do red maple saplings, red maples in 5 gallons, and a few 3-inch calibers, so that the red maple community is you have, you know, all on all fronts. I think same thing with the floodplain species. It's less of a planting plan and more of a restoration plan. So we'll do lots and lots of tublings. So if you plant 100 and only 30 survive, but that's enough. So I think there's kind of a boot and suspenders approach to the planting, but it's layered, and you're giving some of the younger saplings will establish better than some of the bigger plants, but the bigger plants will help create out the invasives. I think I use as a model, I think one of the best planting projects ever done in the city is the Ravine in Prospect Park. And that's how they did it. They did it with a variety of saplings, like, you know, 3 generations of plants. And basically you establish the community, not to say that, you know, some volunteer weed pulling might be in order, because mitigating mugwort and Phragmites are, you know, like a pretty challenge in the urban environment. So, I mean, the preparation is just as important as the planting. There's no, that said, you know, the stream will bring what it brings, and it will come with the seed bank from wherever it's coming from. So it's going to evolve. We just don't want it to evolve into, you know, complete Phragmites spatch again. So I think it's the structural, the soils have to be right, the mitigation of the invasives have to be right, and the care during establishment, really stringent controls on the timing of planting. You know, no rushing in August to put it in. It has to go in when it has to go in. And I working with park, you know, on the specifications and really setting those criteria it's everything. So it's multi-layered, and it will be in the hands of the hands of parks. But I think the combined DEP parks effort here will definitely help it over time. You know, there's a joint vested interest in it being successful.
Well, thank you very much for that thorough answer. I'm sure Parks is using every resource at your disposal for like partnerships. So, because I imagine in the initial years, the establishment period will require a lot of reading, which Parks doesn't typically have resources to do, right? So glad that you're all thinking about this.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance has been in on all of the design meetings. They've also commented on access and things. So very much maintenance has been part of the design conversation.
Great. So glad to hear that.
I would also just like to add, just having done a similar project in the past, a lesson learned I had that I wish I knew is to separate some budget for replanting, say, 2 years after the fact, because there will be a degree of failure, and that's expected with this kind of work. But what's sad is when you know there's going to be failure, you see the failure, but you don't have any way to replace it. So if the budget were to allow, separate a little bit of money, establish when is it 2 years, is it 3 years, but acknowledge that there will need to be some replanting, and that's fine.
It's a greenhouse in Van Cortlandt Park.
Any last thoughts before I summarize your comments, everyone? Okay. All right. So there's a few comments before we take the vote. Some have to do with the refinement of the architectural elements, particularly the lighting, the davit pole, and thinking about its suitability as a kind of message in the pedestrian bike path. So just something to look at. Also the railing, looking at the cohesion of the railing across all of the different widths and landscape types, and thinking about, especially where it's narrow, thinking about the kind of choice of railing there. Thinking about identity and continuity in general across all of the spaces, and perhaps maybe even a phasing diagram in your next presentation. And also thinking about signage as part of what pulls it together across all of the landscape types. And finally, we talked about maintenance and the question of whether there would be any, and that's, you're still developing that, but we'd love to hear about it. Whether there'll be some VAC activity for the poorest pavers ever and a replanting budget, that sort of thing, the maintenance plan, it would be great if the designers could help parks with a maintenance guide over time and regardless of, you know, where you are at this moment. So with that, I'll call a roll call vote. And commissioners, if you could state your vote when I call your name. Isabel Castilla. Lori Hawkinson.
Approved.
Bill Heinzen.
Approved.
Manuel Miranda.
Approved.
Susan Margantha.
Approved.
Merrill Tish, are you with us still in this meeting? Okay, we'll go to Jimmy Van Bramer. I also approve extraordinary project. We have to give you a round of applause because after 25 years. Approval is unanimous. And with that, that concludes this meeting and the public meeting is also concluded.